Welcome. It's a new episode of Stealing Home and Extra Innings. And this episode, we're going to dive into a little bit of baseball 101 and give you some things that you might not know if you're just a casual fan, if you're just someone who enjoys the sport, but doesn't get too geeky about it. And that's spring. What? That's
adding me, subtweeting me right
well,
there.
that's spring training. So what is spring training? Why does it happen? What does it mean? Why spring training?
Who, what, where,
when of spring training? That's what we're going to get into in this episode. So hopefully when you're done with this one, you're going to know all about why it happens, and maybe you'll enjoy a little bit of spring training yourself. Are you pretty versed in spring training? Do you think you know about it?
I know about spring training.
Okay.
Now, what I said earlier before we did this episode too, I said I'm excited to see what she comes up with, because if there's one thing I know about my sister is when you research a topic, she gets crazy into the topic. So I like to see where you go with this. But are you just going to tell me it's preseason baseball? Because I know that. Baby,
there's so much more to this.
Yeah, I could imagine.
But I will say that while that is true, I'll also say the amazing thing about sports in general, but about baseball, is you start getting into baseball and you start researching the history, you're going to find so many crazy things. And I'm going to tell you some of these today and how because they relate to spring training and what we're even doing. So
baseball's old, and there's a lot of wacky history.
The
further back you go, the further back you go.
It is wacky. So let's get into it. What is spring training, right? We all know, for the most part, that baseball runs for 162 games, the course of 6 months from April to October. But there's this whole other part of baseball that happens down here in Florida where we are, and in Arizona over the winter. And that is the subject of today's video, spring training. So earlier, it's kind of like, you could think of it as preseason baseball, but honestly, it's a little bit more than that. The simplest way to define it is to say that it's essentially a series of exhibition practice games between the 30 different MLB teams. You might not know this, but there's actually 2 leagues for spring training, kind of similar to the National League and the American League, but they're not split up that way. They're split up by geographic location. So there is the Cactus League, which is in
Arizona.
That's right. Ding, ding.
Hence the cactus.
1 point for Ant.
It's in the desert.
For the Cactus League.
I like this. I get points.
And, and then there's the Grapefruit League, which happens right here where we are in Florida. The leagues actually don't play each other. They just play within each other. Do you know how much baseball happens during spring training?
36 games in 6 weeks.
He's reading the notes. So during spring training, it's actually quite a lot of baseball. So teams will play anywhere from 16 to 36 games in 6 weeks. So that's 4 to 6 games a week. It's basically a baseball game every day. So it's pretty intense. But the thing to remember about spring training baseball is, even though the teams are playing every day, the players aren't actually, not every player is playing every single game.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, in the beginning of spring training, it's usually like the starters probably don't even play the first couple games.
Yes.
And if they do, they'll play like the first 3 innings. And then towards the end, as it gets closer to the season, then they start ripping 9 innings.
Right. And there's a reason for that. So it's kind of similar to preseasons you'll see in other sports like the NFL. So for new players, spring training is a chance to meet the team they're going to be on, kind of integrate into that clubhouse. For returning players, it's that chance to get out there, get practice in, get ready for the new season. For the coaches, probably most importantly, it's a chance for them to prepare for the season. They're going to strategically evaluate what's going on with all their players, understand who the new players are, where they fit into the lineup, and start making some cuts or additions.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think majority of it is dudes that are trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Like they're fighting for a job.
Right, and that's actually why, I don't know if you know this, well, you probably don't know this if you're watching this video, but pitchers and catchers historically always report to spring training actually a week earlier than any other position. And that's usually because teams will sign on a lot of pitchers. This goes back all the way to like the 1800s. They sign on a lot of pitchers because you need a lot of pitchers, but you don't need so many. So they usually end up cutting a lot of people during spring training.
Is that why?
That is why.
All right.
Now,
I figured that
not in my notes.
The pitchers and catchers go early because they start, or like obviously catchers go with pitchers, but they go because to get their arm in shape.
So that's what I saw a lot. And actually, our buddy Ben Verlander, he wrote an article where
Otani's secret admirer.
No, this time
not so secret.
No, this time Ben was really getting obsessed with Vladdy. Shout out to Ben Verlander and the great work you do. And he mentioned that. So there's, there's this conception that the pitchers report early because it takes more time for the pitcher to get their timing down than it does for a batter to get their timing down in the box. But actually, it's a historical thing going back to they would sign a bunch of pitchers. You'd have a bunch of pitchers there and not know who you're going to go with. So they show up early, and it gives them just an extra week to evaluate all the different guys they need and decide who's going to be in the bullpen.
Okay. I call
It's probably a little bit of both.
teeny weeny bit of BS on that, but
I mean, you're gonna question me about the 1800s?
no, I'm just saying. Well, first, I think they'll just take like any guy that they could get in the 1800s, like any guy named Lefty Screws.
Right.
He's gonna be a starter.
Yeah,
but
Rusty Nuts is showing
also,
up for
in
his
the
game.
1800s, how many pitchers? They only needed one. Like they had one pitcher pitch every game, all 9 innings. So I want to call BS on that.
Well,
one.
that's what the Encyclopedia of Baseball told me. So what can we say?
Nah.
So let's talk about why did spring training start? Fun fact.
I think I know why it started, but I don't know if it's the real reason.
Spring training turns 138 years old this year. Did you know that?
No.
So we've been doing that for 130. Now you know.
How many times have we been playing baseball though? Longer than 138.
Longer. So it actually started in 1886. This is probably something a lot of people can assume, but essentially when MLB was around in the 1800s, most of the teams that made up the league were in cities in the north. So it was cold during the winter and the spring, and teams couldn't practice outside. In fact, I found this interesting. A lot of teams had to practice in gymnasiums just to get ready for the new season. So they're like,
that's what I did when I played.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I played baseball in Vermont.
Just imagine like
our season was before spring training. So
oh yeah, so you can't get outside. You're out there in like in a volleyball gym.
we played at Northeastern in Boston, and they had snow on the field. They had to plow it off before we played. It was snowing while we played.
Right.
And being from Florida, that's crazy.
So a lot of teams couldn't practice. If they were practicing indoors, but obviously that's not the same or as good as practicing outside, which is where I hope you know this. That's where baseball's played. So it was actually Albert Spalding,
basketball Spalding?
Albert Spalding, who was then president of the Chicago White Stockings.
He's probably pissed off that all these guys were in his gymnasium.
He was a former pitcher and the creator of the Spalding Sporting Goods Company. Spalding, who was then the president of the White Stockings, he decided it would be better to find somewhere warm for these players to play and get ready for the season.
What year is this now?
This was in 1886.
Damn, okay.
So can you guess where Spalding chose to be his location?
In 1886? Texas, Virginia.
Well, no.
No, it's probably Pennsylvania or something.
No, he chose Hot Springs, Arkansas as his destination. And according to MLB.com, the reason that Spalding chose Hot Springs, Arkansas was because, quote, it had good weather, quote from MLB, it had good weather, mountains for hiking, and most importantly...
Arkansas has mountains?
Yes, apparently.
I didn't know that.
Apparently.
It probably does in the northern, like, Tennessee area.
And most importantly, the hot springs were there, quote, to boil out the alcoholic microbes in the hard-living players.
So, I was going to say that's what I thought spring training was started for.
No.
What?
It was started because of the colds. That is true.
The old legend that I know with baseball is that spring training started because in the off season, all these guys would go out and drink and be fellas, essentially.
Yeah.
And they'd be out of shape, so they went to somewhere hot where they could sweat out all the toxins that they had.
Right.
Which is essentially what Dad said.
Right. If Saturday's for the boys and your season hasn't started yet, every day's Saturday and you're drinking a lot, right? But it's kind of both, right? So
it's like to condition them.
He realized, hey, it's better if we just go somewhere where we can actually practice. Oh yeah, and all my players are alcoholics. Let me find somewhere
Lefty Screws is
where
drinking
they can sweat out this alcohol. So he chose Hot Springs, Arkansas because they could get into really good shape. He actually chose it because the hiking in the mountains would help them build endurance and basically do leg day every day. And also the high altitude would be, helpful to them. Plus, those hot springs meant they could sit there and just sweat out all the alcohol they had drank. So, fun fact, Ty Cobb, Cy Young, and Babe Ruth, who apparently hit a 500-foot home run into an alligator farm. I really wanted to go deeper into this, but I could not. We might have to explore that later. But yes, Ruth, who
that's not even like his longest home run.
No, but the alligator.
According to legend.
No, but the alligator farm is
pretty cool.
Pretty interesting. So they all practice in the hot springs in Arkansas. In the 1920s, teams started to look for even warmer climates with nicer, newer parks. And that led them to California, Florida, and Cuba, among some, other warm places. But eventually, Florida and Arizona would come to be the spots for spring training. So why did Florida and Arizona become the spots for spring training? Because we started in Arkansas, and now we're heading to two completely different places in the country. And
still south.
Still south, yeah. But it comes down to this one guy from Tampa, which is where we are, D.B. McKay.
Represent.
And he was convinced, in 1913, he convinced the Chicago Cubs, who I believe were formerly the White Stockings,
okay,
to come to Tampa to do their spring training. And he convinced them by saying that he would pay the players' living expenses for spring training, each one. Can you guess what the living expenses were for one player?
In 1920?
In 1913.
1913? Probably got like $5.
$100 per player.
Okay, it's a lot more than what I thought.
But McKay had this vision for Tampa and really Florida in general to become a hot spot for baseball, and he was right. After he brought the Cubs to Tampa to do their spring training, the next year the St. Louis Browns, fun fact, now the Baltimore Orioles, came to St. Pete, and that's how the Grapefruit League began. In 1947, this guy named Bill Veeck, also aka Sports Shirt Bill, aka Wild Bill, and alleged baseball innovator. He wasn't
Jesus. This guy did everything.
Yeah, we'll get into him. But he actually is the guy who innovated with like having fireworks in stadiums.
Sweet.
I'm learning tons of stuff.
He's cool.
He wasn't a big fan of something that was going on in the South around this time.
Racism?
Yeah,
bad.
Okay. Yeah, Bill Veeck.
I was going to say.
Baseball innovator, apparently.
Civil rights leader?
Oh,
damn, this dude, guy they never taught us about.
I don't want to go too far, but yeah, he wasn't a fan of the Jim Crow South, according to, again, this is from MLB.com.
You know what? Me neither.
Neither.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
that's bad.
I agree with Sports Shirt Bill.
Yeah. Likewise, here. So and the South is where, hopefully you know this, you don't need a video to explain it, it's where Florida is. So he had owned several teams at this time, but he decided he was going to take a step back from baseball, and he moved to his ranch in Arizona. However, he tried to get out, and they pulled him right back in. He ended up buying the Cleveland Indians, and he signed Larry Doby, who is the AL's first black player. Mm-hmm. And he decided he was going to move the spring training from Florida, which was in the heart of the South, Jim Crow era, to Mesa, Arizona. And that was how the Cactus League was born.
Dope.
Yeah.
Well, have you seen the Jackie Robinson movie?
No, I have not.
I think they played in like some Kissimmee or Brooksville or something, or I don't know. But it had like a portion of the movie and having to deal with spring training and dealing with the racism there. So I guess Sports Shirt
Bill Veeck was onto something.
Yeah, Sports Shirt Bill was just like, nah, screw Florida.
Wild
Bill
was
Arizona.
Like, that was too wild for me.
Yeah.
So why are they called the Grapefruit and the Cactus Leagues? Could you guess why? Do you know why?
Arizona's a desert.
That is true.
Cactus.
Good point.
Florida, oranges, grapefruit.
No. So
yeah, 100% yes. Tell me why it's called that.
So as far as we can tell, yes, the Cactus League is named the Cactus League because there's cacti in Arizona.
So
but
point me.
Again, this is according to MLB.com, our source for all investigative journalism on Major League Baseball. In 1915, a lot of teams were being settled in Florida for their spring training. At the time, a pilot named Ruth Law was dropping golf balls out of her plane onto a golf course as part of a promotion. You can't make this up.
Of what?
Of like a golf, some sort of golf thing.
All right.
So the Brooklyn Dodgers camp was nearby in Daytona Beach.
That's where they were. Okay.
And
Jackie Robinson.
Right.
Brooklyn.
And the players had the bright idea to get Law, instead of dropping a golf ball, have her drop a baseball 500 feet out of her plane for someone to catch.
Is this the video that was trending lately with Babe Ruth catching a baseball out of a plane?
No. Okay. Although I will say this.
There's a video of that on Twitter that was starting to trend recently.
Maybe this is not in any way related to this, although maybe he heard this story and was like, let's drop
I'll one up it. All right.
But let me just say this. Maybe don't catch baseballs from planes. That seems like a bad idea.
Why?
Okay.
What? I would do that.
So, of course, it's
you
baseball.
Have a glove.
So it's 1915, and this is America, and we're talking about baseball, so nothing can be that simple. And, of course, this thing gets a little wacky. So the manager for the Dodgers at the time, Wilbert Robinson, he grabbed a mitt, and he volunteered to be the guy who's going to catch this baseball. Unfortunately, Law, I don't know how, she had one thing she had to do that day, apparently, was to drop a baseball from her plane. She forgot the baseball. Somebody did. And she instead grabbed a grapefruit from the ground crew's lunch boxes and dropped it down. Robinson caught it. It splattered all over him. And he freaked out thinking that it was his own blood from catching this baseball. Thankfully, he was fine. But this is the legend of how Florida became known as the Grapefruit League.
All right. Whatever. I'd say it's BS, but I don't think it is. I feel like that actually happened. Because there is video evidence of Babe Ruth catching a ball out of a plane, so they definitely did that.
I don't think that they would put it on their website if it wasn't like somewhat accurate, but you know.
And she didn't forget. Like, she just wanted to play a prank on him.
Maybe. Somebody let us know.
Should have been a watermelon.
Ruth probably isn't around. It's been over 100 years. But if somebody has her diary or knew her, please comment below if you think it was, if she forgot it or it was on purpose. But that's what spring training is, right? Which is just really practice baseball. We're getting in the groove, getting ready for the season, right? Does it matter?
In what sense?
For the season.
Of course. It does. If you say it does.
But not really.
It does matter.
It matters in the sense that they're warming up, yes. But the stats in the games played do not count at all towards the regular season stats or for any of the wins or losses.
Yeah.
And this is why you'll get in some leagues kind of baseball adjacent people, so people who are athletes or used to be athletes like Russell Wilson coming in and playing a few games in a league, or you'll get people who aren't at all tied to baseball like Will Ferrell coming into the Cactus League and playing on every single team in that league.
He's on the square.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
how we got that.
Do you know what Will Ferrell did specifically? He's the first person to ever do this.
He played for like all the teams.
He played for 9 different teams and 9 different positions in one day.
Yeah,
first one to ever do that.
Because he was on, and then he played one extra one because he played in all 10 all 10 games or in all 10 teams. So you might be wondering at this point, I know sports betting is really big. Is there a correlation between spring training and who will win the World Series?
I would say if there is one, I feel like it would be whoever comes in last ends up winning, usually. Is that how it goes? Not
really. So there can be, but there also kind of isn't. So a couple years ago, the Red Sox won the Grapefruit League and went on to win the World Series. The Yankees did the same thing in 2009, but in another league or in another year, the Cubs finished second to last in the Cactus League and won that year's Fall Classic. So it really is kind of up in the air.
So no, there's no
not
correlation.
Really. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna find some cases where one team did really well in their spring training and then they dominated, and then there's gonna be times where people didn't really do too well, and then they came back.
I think the Angels were first place the last 2 years, and
look at how that went.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know. I think that makes sense. I think it's more so for the fans to get excited before the season starts. Like, if your team stinks and you win spring training, then that's something you can hang your hat on.
That's
like when the Rays were perpetually bad and they won one year. I was like, oh, sweet. It's like we won spring training. Cool.
Well, but that's basically
we won the preseason. That's essentially.
Well, basically that's what spring training is. There's a lot of history tied to it. It's very interesting. A lot of it had to do with the fact that these guys really needed to get in shape and apparently sweat out all the alcohol they had drank during the off season. But that's spring training. So next time you're wondering what is all this hullabaloo about spring training? How does this even work? Why is this happening? Now you know.
Dope. Did you hear, you mentioned, before we get off, you mentioned Ruth hitting a 500 home run, 500 foot
Into
home
an
run.
alligator farm.
Yeah. You know, there's like a legend that he was over here in St. Pete. Or he might have been in Tampa. No, I think he was in St. Pete because I think the Yankees used to spring train on that side of the bay.
Okay.
And he had a 600-foot home run. That actually might have happened in University of Tampa. I don't know. Maybe that's something you can look up. Look up, babe. It happened somewhere in Tampa Bay area. I think it might have been at University of Tampa, and he hit a 600-foot home run allegedly.
Are you sure it was with a baseball or was it with a grapefruit?
It was a baseball.
Okay.
Grapefruit would have exploded.
Allegedly.
The grapefruit would have exploded.
Well, yeah. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe, like the video. Thanks for watching this far. Stay tuned for more extra innings where we're going to be explaining just some baseball 101 knowledge throughout the season. And yeah, leave a comment if you liked it.